I'm delighted to introduce you to Forrest Alton and his colleague Casey Banks. And Forrest was the former CEO of the South Carolina Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, now Fact Forward, and has done a lot of work on leadership. So we're really excited for this engaging workshop. And I'm going to turn it over to Forrest. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a question about, this is the session for administrators. So if you are a program administrator, this is about leading through uncertainty for program administrators. If you're looking for the facilitator session, I can put that in the chat. Take it away, Forrest and Casey.
Great, thanks, Katie, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I think by now, close on the West Coast, no matter where you are, it's close to afternoon. Katie being one, and others of you who are on the East Coast, it's time for your kids to get home from school. We understand that. If you're on the West Coast, it's time for lunch. We understand that. But I'm going to make a small request before we get started. I was on the earlier session listening to Jonah. It was fantastic. I get my energy from all of you, and so I'm wondering, those of you that are willing and able, any of you that are willing and able to come off camera, we'd love to have you. Although I understand that, you know, different things are happening in your day and in your background and all that sort of stuff. Coach G, thank you for jumping on. Meredith, hi. Marianne, thank you. Those of you that are able to show us your smiling faces. I will say we're going to do just a very quick introduction. Before I introduce myself, I want all of you to have a chance to introduce yourselves, and rather than going around the room with 100 people, I thought we'd try to do this in the good old-fashioned way we used to. Remember when we all used to be able to get together in the same room? We'd say, turn to your neighbor and introduce yourself, get to know each other. It's a little complicated in a Zoom to do that, but we're going to give it a shot. We're going to do that by getting us into small groups of 2 just for a couple of minutes. I'm trying to see, Katie, help me. Is it Cameron, I think, that's going to push us out into groups in just a second? And Cameron, I'll give you the thumbs up here momentarily. But when you get into your group, and by group I mean pair, I want you and your partner to do 3 things very quickly. Obviously, your name and what state you're from, the role you have in your organization, and then I just want you to check in with each other. How are you doing? How are you doing? You can interpret that question as, how are you doing today? How are you doing in 2021? How are you doing, you know, at work? Where are you? And I just want you to spend 3 minutes. So that's about 90 seconds apiece. Your name, state, the role in your organization, and just check in with each other. So Cameron's going to push us out, and we'll be back here in 3 minutes. For us, appreciate that. Thank you all for the quick check-in. I'm just wondering if you learned anything interesting about your partner or anybody in your group that you want to share from the little check-in. Just pop it into the chat. I was glad to see that all of you are very agile and familiar chat users as I was watching you interact in the morning plenary session, or the session that was just before this one. Sarah, you got to talk to somebody you already knew. Carrie loves snow. Well, for those of you in certain parts of the country, you've got plenty of it right now. I know that to be sure. We just wanted to give you a chance maybe to meet some new people. Sarah, sometimes you get somebody new when we do these random groups. Also wanted to make sure that we all had just a second to check in. You know, as I'm thinking about this administrator conversation where you all are coordinators, administrators, leaders. One of the things that we have recognized over time is we spend an awful lot of our minutes and days checking in with other people. But too often we aren't asking ourselves, right? Or our peers, how are you doing? What's going on? And the title of this session being Leading Through Uncertainty. There's plenty of different ways we can take this discussion, plenty of different things we can talk about. Casey's popping up the slides here. Let me just take 30 seconds and tell you a little bit about 1000 Feathers so that you know. Katie said in her introduction that I'm the president and co-founder of this consulting firm, 1000 Feathers. Before I founded the consulting firm, I was the CEO of the South Carolina Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, now Fact Forward, in South Carolina. But in 2016, we launched this firm to do a couple different things, to bridge a divide between communities, organizations, and funders. And it's interesting, in the PrEP and CPrEP and all the different worlds that are represented on the phone today, you all are trying to do exactly some of those things, right? Bridge gaps between your funding source, your organization, the needs of community. And we also wanted to help people do a better job connecting vision and strategy. I summarize this by saying we spend most of our time helping organizations solve problems and helping to transform organizations and communities. I'll just pop up this quick slide, or have Casey pop it up, of some of our clients from around the country. If you're in New York or California or Texas or Oklahoma or North Carolina or South Carolina, you probably recognize some of the folks that we've had the pleasure of working with. And again, our responsibility in this conversation today is specifically focused on leading through uncertainty. So I put this picture up, not the picture necessarily, but the slide. Those of you that are so inclined, feel free to tweet along, and we'll catch up with you on social media after the session today. I also put it up, I say a little bit tongue in cheek, but not really. When Jonah was talking on the earlier session, and he was talking about having a collared shirt on, I sort of looked down and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't have a collared shirt on. I wonder if I should go change. And then I thought, nah, we're okay. Coach G's in a hoodie, like we're good. Like, these are my people, everything's fine. But I did want to show you that I can wear a collared shirt and a suit if I have to. Today's not that sort of day. I know all of you probably can dress up when we have to, but we're going to really roll up our sleeves, literally and figuratively, and dive into some conversation over the next 2 days together. What are we going to do specifically? Just a quick look at the agenda, and then we'll get going. First of all, I want to talk about some of the challenges of the moment, right? With the title of the session being Leading Through Uncertainty, I want to just set that stage a little bit, and challenges plural here for sure. One of our suggested strategies for meeting the challenges of the moment is to really focus on talking about organizational resilience. So I want to spend some time there. What is organizational resilience? Why does it matter? How do you do it? Those sort of things. Also going to talk a little bit towards the end of the day today, something that I care an awful lot about, and that we spend an awful lot of time with organizations working on, which is how do we move from management to leadership. And then we're going to get into some very practical applications and tools. We're going to race through some conceptual, theoretical stuff today to set the background. And then the entire time we spend together tomorrow, towards the end of the day today and tomorrow, will all be about practical application, tools you can take back to your organization, things you can put your hands on, and things that you can use. So I thought we'd start out here again. In the old days, if we were all in a room together, this would be a perfect call response activity. But I want you to just go ahead and say it out loud with me, like, nothing about this is normal. Nothing about the days and times we're trying to operate in is normal. If you want to come off mute and yell it out loud, you should feel free. If you just want to say it to yourself, that's okay. Your kids may look at you crazy if you yell out, nothing about this is normal, or your spouse, but that's all right. They're used to it by now. But I think it's an important part of this discussion, and it's important for us to latch onto this and really hear ourselves say it, especially as leaders within our organization by any definition, right? At a minimum, we've all gone virtual. You maybe are sneaking into the office a couple days a week here or there, depending on where you live, depending on what organization you work for. But by and large, we're doing a lot of this stuff virtual. Many of us, myself included, are used to being in high touch environments, face-to-face meetings, interacting with other people, being in rooms with folks, whether that's our staff or our partners, and we've lost some of that touch. On a good note, and I suspect we'll see some today, we've got kids and pets over our shoulder, and we're trying to manage different things, and the repair guy's coming and the doorbell's ringing, right? You may have people in your organization, especially if you're a part of a health department or otherwise, who have been reassigned to other priorities, and we're scrambling, right, for lots and lots of reasons. None of this that we're working through is normal. And I think that's important to say out loud. And specifically, there are some really significant things that are happening in our country right now and that have been happening over the last 12 months or so that we continue to refer to with our partners and clients as the challenges of the moment. And I think about the fact that, first of all, we are in the midst of a global pandemic. That's not news for any of you. You're well aware of that. I think about things that happened this summer around social justice uprising and marches and protests and a real reckoning that we've had across the country with race and with social justice and with economic justice. I think about the fact that, we're now approaching 450,000 people in the United States that have lost their lives as the result of a pandemic. I pulled this newspaper article very, very intentionally. This was from May 24th of 2020, when we reached 100,000. And the newspaper headline, 100,000 dead, and the newspaper headline referred to an incalculable loss, right? And try to think back a year ago, right, to mid-February, before we even knew really that what was ahead of us. To think that we would be sitting here a year later, that 450,000 people had died as the result of a pandemic, that we would have had all of the uprisings that we had this summer, that we would have had an election season and an insurrection at the Capitol, right? All of these things. And you might be thinking, well, like, what does this have to do with anything? Well, it's got everything to do with your positioning as a leader within your organization. We aren't going to go in depth on any of these sort of crises today. Casey, hold that last slide just for a second. We aren't going to talk about any of these in depth today. But, we just, again, need to continue to recognize as leaders that our organizations, our states, our nation, we're currently faced with a lot of these issues simultaneously. And let us not forget that these situations and more are responsible in part for some of the uncertainty that we're attempting to lead through, right? And the real challenge here is the intersection of all these things. The real challenge is the fact that while some of them may not have impacted your organization directly, I promise you that they're impacting your staff on an individual level, right? And if we haven't cleared space to talk about these issues, your staff has noticed that, right? And how we're responding to some of these things that are happening in the world around us as organizations and as leaders absolutely matters, because all of these things, right, are by definition disruptions. They're disruption in the community and they're disruption for our organization that we have to lead through. And whether the title of this session was Leading in Uncertainty or Leading Through Disruption, this is partly what we want to dive into today, because all of these issues, right, create different circumstances for us as leaders, no matter what role we play in the organization, play for us as leaders to have to manage through. I'm not going to go all the way back, but I'll stay on this slide where we just were, just to really tee up this discussion about what we're talking about today is leading through uncertainty. And again, I pulled this slide up earlier that references a number of things. If you think about the last 12 or 13 months, not only have we been dealing with a global pandemic, we have been confronted with reckoning, with 400 years of oppression and injustice of people of color in this country that manifested in protests and actions this summer. We've been through an election season. We've been through an insurrection at the Capitol, right? There are lots and lots of things that have been happening all around us. And at first glance, you might look at some of these things and say, yeah, I mean, but our organization doesn't deal with that issue, or that hasn't impacted us directly. But I promise you that as leaders within your organization, these issues have and indeed are continuing to impact your staff and your team members and your partners And if these aren't conversations that we're clearing space for folks to have, it's difficult for us to just say, yeah, leave that stuff outside. And when you come to work, focus on your work. That's not the world we're living in right now, right? And all of these things have to matter to us as organizational leaders, no matter where in the organizational chart you are. If you're in this session, by definition, you have some leadership responsibility. And for the purpose of this conversation, right? And I don't really want to get into semantics here, but for the purpose of this conversation, I think we can also call all of these things disruptions, right? And they're disruptions at different levels. And one of the things that's important for us to recognize when we're having a conversation about leading through uncertainty is that disruption is not a new concept. It's been happening to companies, to organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, government agencies for years and years and years. And I thought I'd just highlight a couple that might look familiar to you. So first is, does anybody recognize this logo? Maybe you probably have to be of a certain age, or else you're like, who are you talking about here? If you are of a certain age, I happen to be at least part of this generation where you might be familiar with the term Kodak moment, right? Kodak used to have such a dominant market share of cameras and photography that it became a verb, almost like Google it today is, right? Like it's a Kodak moment. It's made for a photograph. Somebody pop into the chat if you maybe have a guess here of where I'm headed in terms of disruption, or come off mute if you'd like. Renee says, I miss those photo days actually on paper. Hold that thought, Renee. But what was the disruption that Kodak faced? Why don't we hear about Kodak anymore? What happened?
Cell phones took over.
Who said that? Was that Mitchell?
Yes.
Mitchell said cell phones took over. Renee, the digital age, digital photography, digital cameras, technology, digital. I will say that all of you in the chat are headed in the right direction. Who said failure to rebrand and innovate? Michaela, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Lynette didn't make the shift to digital technology. But I want to go to what Mitchell said, right, in just a second. So those of you that said digital and technology, here's the interesting thing for Kodak. They actually invented and discovered the digital technology, right? So it wasn't that the technology itself came and they didn't notice. They had it in their hand. They invented it. They actually created and invented the first digital camera at Kodak. What Kodak missed, though, Mitchell and I gotta scroll back here. Who said it? I think it was Renee going back. Yeah, Renee and Mitchell. What Kodak missed was the transition and the combination of digital and technology, right? It wasn't the digital camera that caught them off guard. It was the fact that we were all going to stop printing pictures and we were going to be sharing them online. We were going to have them on our phones. And they were going to be on Facebook and social media instead of us going to Walgreens or CVS and printing them out. So that disruption for them really messed up their whole business model. We don't hear about Kodak much anymore at all. That was good. You guys did good with that. Let's try another one. How about this logo? Anybody remember this one? Probably makes your hair on your arm stand up. I can still remember sprinting to the store and being worried about my $1.49 fee because I forgot to rewind the tape. Right? You got to be with me here to know late fees. Yeah, Kit, you got it right. And Jordan jumps in the chat here, predicting my question. Good, Jordan, I love it. What was the disruption for Blockbuster? We used to have these on every corner in our community. Where are they now? Carrie said, I was just having this conversation the other day. Carrie, come off chat. Tell me more about the conversation or come off mute. Tell me more about the conversation you were having.
So the other day I was driving through a part of town that I grew up in that I hadn't been to in a very long time. And I was with my partner and his son. And I was like, that used to be a Blockbuster, that Advanced Auto Parts, and just kind of pointing out what it was, a really popular street with a lot of shops and restaurants and businesses. So just left and right, I was like, those apartments used to be in Anderson's. That Advanced Auto Parts used to be a Blockbuster. So I was just having this conversation the other day.
Yeah, and some of that growth and change in our communities is very natural, right? It's a progression, it's advancement. But in other cases, like Blockbuster, they had a disruption that was in front of them that they were looking at, and they failed to adapt and adjust. Julie, you were the first one to pop Netflix in the chat. I wonder if you want to come off mute and say anything more about that. How you think Netflix disrupted Blockbuster?
Well, at first, Netflix, you could order them online and they'd send the video to your house. So then you didn't even have to leave your house to get to Blockbuster. And then it all became streaming. So you just went on your smart television or on your phone or whatever the case may be on your internet and just pulled up. You don't even need Netflix to send you the physical copy anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Now, here's the interesting thing again, and there's a reason why I specifically chose Kodak and Blockbuster, because again, the disruption was right in their face, right? This wasn't like somebody snuck up on them. In fact, did you know that in the year 2000, check this out now, in the year 2000, the two guys that created Netflix walked into the office of the CEO of Blockbuster and offered to sell him Netflix for $50 million. And the CEO of Blockbuster said, no, thanks. I don't think your business model is going to work. Right? Talk about like, holy smokes, 21 years later, where are they? Something that just happened recently, another disruption we've seen, GameStop, right? You've probably seen this all over the news. Now, I have to be honest. I know nothing about the stock market. I don't even know enough to explain to you what happened with GameStop. What I do know is that as soon as I saw it, given the work I do, I thought disruption. Somebody has disrupted the market, right? And the people who were in charge of paying attention to this stuff didn't see it coming. So the point here is in no way, shape, or form am I attempting to compare any of these things, right? I'm not comparing Blockbuster to Black Lives Matter movement. I'm not comparing Kodak to the pandemic. I'm not comparing GameStop to your organization. My point is, number one, disruption's not a new concept. And number two, that disruption for us comes in all shapes and sizes all the time. And so, Casey, if we bump ahead 2 slides, actually, what we're going to work from today is the frame that anyone can lead, right, when the plan is working. Anyone can lead when the plan is working. The best lead when the plan falls apart. And you can interpret that now in your organizations as your work plan, your annual plan, your strategic plan, your daily plan, whatever it is. Mike Tyson, right? This quote's a little less PC, but again, many of you probably know Mike Tyson. Mike used to say, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. That was his version of this quote. And for a lot of us, especially that are in leadership roles in our organizations right now, it feels like we've gotten punched in the face for one reason or another, right? And again, this is not Forrest being critical. It's just Forrest observing the world. We've heard from our project officer or from our grant source that things are going to change, or that we can or can't do in-person instruction, or we can or can't spend money this way, or maybe our grant got renewed, maybe it didn't get renewed. Maybe somebody else above us in the organization has reassigned some of our staff, right? And all of a sudden we're looking at our work plan or looking at our strategic plan and thinking, well, what am I supposed to do with this, right? Like, now my plan is falling apart. What am I supposed to do? From our perspective, because disruptions come in all shapes and sizes, we're going to keep talking about that in just a minute. The way through disruptions is to practice organizational resilience. I'm going to give you another example really quick in the moment, right? 2 disruptions that have happened today, just since we've been on the phone together. First of all, as a presenter, I'm in a little rhythm. I'm going, my hands are waving like we're having a good conversation. And then I see in the chat, wait a minute, we've got the wrong people in your session. Disruption, right? It's a little disruption, but it's still a disruption. Then I get a note from my colleague in the chat box that, we had this all planned out. We've been practicing. We've been rehearsing. She's going to advance the slides for me. Casey and I have worked together for 14 years. We sort of share a brain. And earlier today, I was thinking to myself, like, man, Casey knows that I wanted her to go to the next slide. Like, what happened here? Why didn't she go to the next slide? And I look in the chat and I've got a private message from Casey. It says, I'm sorry, my dog literally just threw up right next to me. Like I was out for a few minutes trying to disruption, right? A little, Casey's was a little more significant than mine, but disruptions happen to us all the time. And so what we've learned as we've been thinking about this concept is you can't just try as a leader to solve every disruption as it comes, because they just keep coming. Instead, what we need to do is practice organizational resilience. So I'm going to try something different here. As opposed to using the chat box, I want all of you to go, if you would please. Casey, that's a direct to me. You need to send it to everybody. But I want everybody to go to menti.com. Maybe you've used Menti before. Some of you in your presentations or otherwise. I want you to go to menti.com. Casey's going to pop the code up here that you're going to need. And what I would like for you to do is just follow the instructions on the screen. What is one word you would use to describe organizational resilience? So go to menti.com. The code is 292069. What is one word? When you hear the term organizational resilience, what is one word that comes to mind? And then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen quick, and we'll look at this together in real time. For those of you that aren't familiar with Menti, it gives you lots of different options to play with and be interactive in your presentations. In this particular case, I chose to make a word cloud out of all the answers that you all were sharing. You can see in the bottom corner, we had 40 different responses, and you all know how word clouds work. The bigger and bolder the word is, means the more times that it was referenced. So flexibility, big, bold, in the middle. Some of you, seeing that your word is not as big as you would like it, are still actively entering your word again. I see how this works. We still have things coming in. Lael said in the chat, momentum. You see things like adaptable, adaptability, innovative, creativity, but then you also see things like bravery, empower, relentless, the ability to pivot. Again, adaptation, adaptability, adaptable, anticipate, resistance, leadership, right? You see these, you guys did a great job with that. And in fact, if we go back to the slides, I've lost my screen share here. Where did it go? There it is. Sorry, you would think 10 months later, I would have figured out the Zoom controls. Casey pulled this back up for us. Let's look at a working definition that we've put together over the last little bit and compare those to some of the words you just had. You're going to see words again like adapt successfully to new and unforeseen conditions and circumstances, to respond effectively to change and responding were part of the words, to communicate more effectively across the organization. And it's this last one that a lot of times we forget about, although I have to tell you, you all had words in here like bravery, creativity, determined, power, powerful, teamwork, right? One of the things that people often forget about when we're talking about resiliency and organizational resilience in particular is this just isn't about bouncing back, right? It's also about our ability to be able to bounce forward. In other words, how are we putting ourselves in position to seize new opportunities? So it's not just about handling the challenges of the moment, but putting ourselves in position to seize new opportunities. Here's the mental model that we're working from on the next slide. And when I say we, I'm talking about 1000 Feathers put together this a whole 2-day training just on organizational resilience with our colleague Tom Klaus from Tenacious Change. Some of you may know Tom from his work across the country. And one of the things that Tom and I realized as we were putting this material on organizational resilience together over time, and I thought it'd be a good fit here, is that a lot of organizations trick themselves, I'm going to use that word, into thinking that resilience and managing uncertainty is about trying new things, right? So start with when you're framing the mental model here, start with this image all the way on the right, and let's read it together from right to left. Because there are multiple futures out there, because there are things we know and things we don't know, there are uncertainties that we're trying to manage. As organizations, sometimes we trick ourselves into thinking we should try a new strategy, right? We should just take our strategic plan, we should redline that strategy, and we should write in a new one, right? We can't meet in person, cross that out, so we're just going to do all these still things the exact same way. We're just going to do them virtually. We're going to try a different strategy. Maybe we're even going to go one step further and we're going to develop some new tools. We might need a new database, or we might need a new website, or we might need to up our social media game, right? Because we're in the midst of a pandemic and we need to do different things. Maybe we're even going to have some new tools. What we're trying to produce here, though, is a situation where organizations that are truly becoming resilient, the organizations that emerge and thrive during these times, are going to have fundamentally changed the way they think, all the way to the left. So the most important thing you're going to hear me say today and tomorrow is that being resilient and managing uncertainty is less about what you do and more about how you think. Again, if you only take one thing away from our next couple hours together over 2 days, being resilient as an organization and being able to lead through uncertainty is less about what you do and more about how you think. And again, changing how you think is important because disruptions just keep coming, right? We can't, as organizations, put ourselves into a mode where we're just going to eliminate disruptions. We're just going to eliminate uncertainty. There is functionally no way that we all can put ourselves in a place where we're predicting the future. So we have to change the way we think. Let me give you one tool, one model that we've been working with organizations on, again, to fundamentally change and restructure the way they think. This model is called the Foresight model. Admittedly, it's not our model. The source is on the left, but it's one out of the organizational resilience literature that we use an awful lot with organizations. Now, I will tell you, a little tongue in cheek, but it's also true. You can tell it's not my model because if it was my model, I never would have used the term foresight to describe the model and then have one of the 4 sites be foresight. I laugh every time I see that, every time I think about it. Nonetheless, right, the model is called the Foresight model. And Gloria, yes, it is changing the way that I think, right? It's changing the way that we approach these issues. And we're going to introduce to you very quickly today this Foresight model, and then we're going to spend about half of our time tomorrow together actually practicing. We're going to get into small groups. We're going to do hindsight, foresight, oversight, insight. Those are the 4 sites you see here. And I'll just say something quickly about each one of them. We'll start. I'm actually going to start with insight. So at the bottom right-hand corner, that's about 4 o'clock, maybe on a clock. Insight is our ability to interpret and respond to the present condition. So what's going on right now, right? Using insight to understand the present condition. Where am I? Really ground yourself. Where is the organization? What are the things we're dealing with right now, and how do we manage them? Number 2, oversight. Monitor and review what has happened and assess changes. Now that's a little bit in the past, right? A little bit in the past, like immediate oversight, like what just happened? Did that event go well? Let's talk about it or not. Like what's happened over the last couple of weeks? Monitor and review what has happened and assess changes. Hindsight is looking even a little further back, right? And learning the right lessons from your experience. Learning the right lessons from your experience. And then foresight is our ability to anticipate, predict, and prepare for your future. So you've got insight, the current condition. You've got oversight, looking a little bit back. Hindsight, looking way back. Foresight, predicting the future. As you look at this model, pop into the chat. which one of these do you really gravitate to? Like, man, yeah, that one. That's the one. That's the one. That's the one that really speaks to me. Is it hindsight? Is it foresight? Is it insight? Renee, insight. Kelsey, foresight. Hindsight. Oh, are we going to get it? Currently, foresight. Oh man, I thought the first 4 comments were going to be one in each site. We didn't quite make it. But we have oversight, insight, foresight, hindsight. Leslie, you were the first one in the chat, so I'm going to ask you if you would come off mute. Why does hindsight speak to you?
Hello, sorry.
Hi, you're good.
Because with all the disruptions going on and all the attempts of how we're supposed to do program delivery from what we've done before, it's like, okay, we've tried something new, it worked out, but what were the issues that were going on? You know what I mean? For
Good.
delivery.
Good. Yeah, I mean, and I think this hindsight one is interesting for me. When we started talking about this foresight model, even before the pandemic, actually, we've been working with organizations in this resiliency frame since about 2017, 2018, so the last 3 or 4 years. But, you know, in March of 2020, we didn't have any hindsight, right? We had never dealt with anything like this. But now in February of 2021, as leaders, we need to be practicing hindsight. And Leslie, I think this is what you were saying, like, we've now gone through, depending on how your year's split up, you know, 10 months of a calendar year or 2 different school semesters. We've also been through a summer. We've been working from home. We've been leading our staff. We've been trying to implement. We got to use hindsight to figure out the right lessons from those experiences to push ourselves forward, right? Exactly right. And again, we can do this with each one of them. And I'm glad to see such a mix in the chat of oversight, hindsight, insight, foresight, because the idea here as leaders, and again, one of the reasons I love this foresight model is because it's not just for CEOs, it's not just for executive directors. This is for everybody in your organization. Gloria, when we're talking about a paradigm shift, you used that word in the chat earlier. This is something we can take to our staff to fundamentally change the way the organization functions. And the idea is not to pick one of these. In fact, when we're doing full day or 2-day trainings on this concept, what we're really trying to do is find the right tension between all 4, right? How are we using all 4? And you can probably go through, I'm not going to ask you to do this now, but I can see the wheels turning. Those of you that are off camera, you can probably think of people in your organization and on your team, right? Who are like, oh God, they use hindsight all the time, but they don't have any foresight. Or man, they're always good for some oversight, but I can't get them to use hindsight, right? Or, you know, geez, people in our office are always walking around saying, well, that's not how we used to do it, right? But we're talking about a combination of all these things and recognizing that across your team, finding the people who excel in these different areas and putting them, watch this now, putting them in conversations together is how we become more resilient, right? So as an organization, it's making sure we're not doing just one of these, we're doing all of them. But in the moment today, I thought we'd just have a little fun with this. And I was going to pick foresight, anticipate, predict, and prepare for your future. Again, recognizing that we want to talk about the balance of these things. So no one circle is the only one. But I thought we'd have a little fun. And this is a little in the moment, as it were, thinking about leading through uncertainty. I thought I might offer you Forrest's foresight, trying to predict the future of work. And this is an example, like when we're sitting around and I'm thinking about that circle foresight, and I'm trying to predict what office environments might look like over the next 12, 18, 24 months, I came up with 4 predictions. I'm going to lay them out just as an example of foresight. And then I'm going to ask how you think I did. So number 1, my first prediction, this is predicting the future of work. My first prediction is that it's not, for those of us who are leaders and managers, especially if we have direct reports, it's not anymore that we can solely manage employees' productivity. We now have to be intentional about managing employees' well-being. and whatever that means in our office. But it's less about produce. Let me see that report. How many widgets did you make? And it's much more as managers about saying, are you okay? Let's check in. Do you have time? I understand there's lots going on in the world, right? That's part of the changing future of work. Second prediction from me is that employees, your employees, my employees, the employees of all the organizations we work with across the country have a growing expectation that organizations are going to step into the critical issues of the day. That organizations are going to have a statement about race and equity, that organizations are going to take a stand on social issues, that organizations are going to speak up. Now, again, I recognize, given the funding source and knowing who's on the phone, and some of you work for state agencies and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know that we can get into that or that we're ever going to get there. I'm just telling you, my prediction of the future of work is this is something, no matter the type of organization you work with, that we're going to all have to figure out together. Another prediction I have is that office life has changed forever. Now, again, I don't want you to screenshot this slide necessarily and run back and tell your boss's boss, like, hey, this dude gave a presentation and he told me I never have to come back to work again. Like, remote work is here to stay. I actually think there's a lot of truth to this. I think there's a lot of us realizing that while it's nice to get together and it's nice to have human interaction, we can be equally productive without having to go to the office every day. I tend to think, as a prediction, that remote work is here to stay. I also think that working 9 to 5 is one of those things that's going to slowly deteriorate over time. Now, again, these are just Forrest predictions, but I'm giving you an example here of foresight, right? Foresight being one of the sites we're going to practice with. And as part of the practice, it's, as you have time. I have a little journal that I keep over here on the side of my desk, and I pull it out, I write in it, I think, and it's usually about me trying to predict the future. Now, again, I'm not a fortune teller, I'm not a tarot card reader, but just using all these sites together. And then number 4, our issues of race equity and gender equality are going to have to be top of mind for all of us as managers and leaders. Now, this is a little different than number 2, right? In number 2, I'm talking about taking a stand publicly as an organization, as a company, taking a stand on the critical issues of the day. Number 4, I'm talking more about internally, right? What are we doing as a company? Have we done our own work when it comes to REI or DEI? Have we done our own work around gender equality, right? Especially in this pandemic, when, quite frankly, we're seeing women be disproportionately impacted in needing to make very difficult decisions about staying in the workforce and also being teachers at home, and how do I balance those things, right? There are gender equality issues we're dealing with. There are certainly race equity issues we're dealing with. And for leaders and managers, we've got to be willing to step into that. We've got to be willing to manage through it. Got to be willing to have some of these conversations. So again, put me to the test here. We're going to go back to Menti. Same menti.com, same code. I have thick skin here, so don't feel like you have to agree just to agree. But how'd I do on those 4 predictions? If I'm thinking about predicting the future, rate on a scale of 1 to 5 the 4 predictions I just gave you. You're either going to, from 1, strongly disagree, up to 5, strongly agree. Casey can maybe pop the code back up again. She did. It's 292069. So yeah, I mean, we tend to agree with most of these. The one that we don't agree with quite as much is a growing expectation we step into the issues of the day. Again, I didn't do this to say, oh, Forrest predictions were right or Forrest predictions were wrong. I just was curious and thought this was a good example of showing, a personal foresight here, personal prediction, because that's one of the ways we practice with foresight. And again, recognizing that none of these circles operate by themselves. So we want to take our predictions and balance them with hindsight. Gloria, you had a really interesting comment in the chat box. I'm going to ask you to come off mute if you don't mind. Was it that Department of Public Health did not use enough hindsight given their previous experiences with SARS, Ebola, et cetera, and learning lessons? Say more about that if you would.
Well, I think that there were different tools that most departments of public health had across the nation that would have better prepared them to address COVID-19. Yet, as a public health employee, there's been a whole lot of confusion, distrust from particularly communities of color behind the whole testing, behind the whole vaccination. I think we were in between administrations. A lot of stuff had happened between the last administration and this administration. There was a lot of information that was lost in the interim. And then there was a lot of stuff in conjunction with the Center for Disease Control that one minute they said, you don't have to wear a mask. And then the next minute they were saying, but you do have to wear. So I think that there was a lot of management and leadership and maybe people being afraid, but it has affected not us as a country, but the world has been affected by this pandemic. And I just think that if we would have learned from some of the lessons before and instituted some of those, or because of the lessons learned, that we would have had a better way to roll it out. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I would love to, go have a glass of wine or lemonade or whatever your pleasure and dive deep into this conversation. I'm going to be careful to not go all the way down the rabbit hole today, because I think there are lots and lots of reasons, many of which you articulated, of why some of the past lessons learned maybe weren't taken on in full, right? But your point, though, is even for this massive disruption, even for as many times as you've heard people say, we've never seen anything like this before, right? Or we're in unprecedented times. You hear people say that stuff all the time. If as leaders and managers, we think clearly enough, you can use hindsight to find examples and grab lessons from all of our previous disruptions, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's this paradigm shift. It's about thinking differently. We maybe haven't seen this particular disruption before, but how can we look back and grab some of those hindsights?
Well, just as a comment again to what you just got finished saying, they said that this vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, was on the fast track. And so there were a lot of people that were suspicious because vaccines normally take years of processes and research. Well, if you look at this vaccine, it's really been 17 years in the making. But the marketing behind that, people weren't saying that. They were just saying, we're going to press through, maybe because people wanted to look better, but they just needed to tweak some of the RHA or whatever. So they could have used that in their benefit. But so many people don't know that this wasn't just a fast track year, that a lot of the variants to this were already in the making. So that to me would have been a very, very remarkable opportunity to use it. And people chose not to. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and again, that being one of 4 sites, and Katie, you had a comment in the chat earlier that I grabbed too as we were looking at our score sheet here on Menti about how do we find the right lessons. And I think at least part of that, and we're going to talk more about this tomorrow when we practice with all of the 4 sites, but at least part of that answer is we have to be willing to put all of the lessons on the table and then filter through them, right, in the situation. And I think one of the reasons that the creators of that model and we as users of the model highlight the term right lessons is to get us out of the mindset that hindsight means, well, just do it the way we used to do it, right? That's not what hindsight's saying. Hindsight's saying, but in every situation, we've learned something, whether it's good or bad. I spent 23 years in South Carolina. I now live in Memphis, Tennessee, but I'm a Gamecock through and through. Those of you that know me previously know that. And our women's basketball team had a hard loss last night. The coach said after the game, we win, we learn. We lose, we learn. but we always come back tomorrow and we look at the lessons we learned and we figure out how to do better, right? That's a leader that's really leaning into the hindsight point. Interestingly enough, one of the higher scores was that office life has changed forever. And Michael, I laughed at your comment. There are a lot of people who are screaming for the 9 to 5 workday. Say more about that. You mean we want to get back to having some boundaries, I assume, but I'd love to hear what you meant by that.
Well, it has been in my experience in the past couple of months that I have been frequently asked the question, when are we coming back into the office? When are we coming back in the office? I need to get back in the office so I can do my work. And it has become like a hard transition for people to actually work from home, because people are very used to leaving their home like their home and then doing their office work at the office.
I hear that.
And when you're combining those two, it causes, as you said, disruptions in their perceptions and in their operation. That's been my experience over the past couple of months. Even as recently as today, one of the staff came into the building to do some work, and she was like, "Mike, can you tell me when we're going to come back in the office full time?" Yeah. And I'm like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
So.
Well, and Michael, you're talking right now about sort of insights, right? In this moment, what can we learn? And the fact of the matter is, our insights right now, in this moment, in February of 2021, are telling us, I think, this might not be universally true, but are telling us different things than our insights would have been in March or April of 2020, right? When this pandemic sort of first started, and it was this sort of abstract concept, and maybe we didn't even know anybody who'd had COVID, or certainly didn't know anybody who'd passed away. And it was like, man, I get to work at home in my pajamas. Like, all right, I'm into that. Now, 10 months later, I think you do, 10 or 11 months later, I do think you have a lot of people like, man, if I don't get out of this house soon, like, I'm starting to really, my mental health is challenged, my relationships are challenged, right? But that's insight. We have to hear it. And that's the point of using all 4 sites as leaders and managers. We've got to hear these things, we've got to pick up on them, and then we've got to know what to do about them, right? So again, that's a model that we're going to practice with tomorrow. We're going to spend some more time there. Speaking of insight, I'm also going to have Casey pop into the chat. I think this can work. Yeah, it's right there. Look at that. We're popping into the chat right now, a resilience inventory. If you click on that, it'll let you save it to your computer somewhere. And I just want to tell you, we are not going to take this survey right now. Let me just repeat that. We are not going to take this survey right now. It should only take you 5 to 8 minutes, probably maximum, to complete it. We are going to talk about the survey in our breakout session tomorrow. Okay, so I would love for you to grab this, put it somewhere on your computer that you can get to it later. We're not going to talk about it right now, but we are going to talk about this survey in our breakout session tomorrow. And this resilience inventory goes, Michael, exactly to what you were just talking about. It's a way for all of us to dial in a little bit deeper on the insight. What is the current condition? And it's not about our employees, it's really at an organizational level. But what is the current condition within our organization? Let's practice using some insight as we take the survey. And again, we're going to come back to all 4 sites, and we're going to come back to the survey tomorrow. In our last 10 or 15 minutes today, though, I thought that I would pivot just a little bit. And in addition to all these concepts about resiliency, we also want to talk about, as leaders in your organization, making the transition, making the pivot from management to leadership, making the pivot from management to leadership. And the reason that I say this, first of all, is we are in this place that if we are correctly using hindsight, insight, foresight, we're probably going to come up with thinking about some new ways of business, some new ways of doing things. And that means internal and external, right? I know that your direct service providers and facilitators are in a different session talking about how to do things differently external. We can talk about how to do them internal. But I'll be honest with you, 10 months now into what has been the most significant disruption of my lifetime, for sure. 10 months into it, I cringe, I really do. When I'm working with organizations and I hear them say, man, I'm so proud of us. We've made it through this pandemic and we didn't change a single thing. And I think, man, like if 10, 11 months later, given everything we've been, you're doing business exactly the same way you were doing it a year ago, like what's happening here is you're about to get left behind, right? Because the way that we're functioning with each other, the way that we're functioning with our employees, the way that we're functioning with our partners has changed forever. And some stuff may come back, don't get me wrong. I hope a lot of things come back. I hope we can be together and have a conference with 200 or 300 people next year and be all in the same room. That'd be great. I'm not saying that we're not going back to any of that stuff. I'm saying that how we do business and how we interact with people has fundamentally changed. And when I hear organizations say, I'm so proud of us, we haven't changed a single thing, I think, man, that sounds an awful lot like Kodak and Blockbuster to me. That sounds an awful lot like what those organizations were saying, right? So let's be real careful and let's lean into some of this ability and willingness to be innovative. So what do I mean specifically when I'm saying we have to move forward from management to leadership? A lot of organizations are still managing, you use quotes, managing the pandemic, right? We got everybody on a laptop, we got everybody up at home, we're managing, we're plowing forward, we're staying the same. I use the analogy of sort of doggy paddling, right? We're just staying afloat. We're just doggy paddling, but we're not moving. When we move from management to leadership, though, we stop doggy paddling and start swimming again. And my real strong suggestion to organizations and the leaders within those organizations is it's time to start swimming again. We've got to start moving forward. So how do we move forward? I'm going to offer 6 things. Again, we're just going to touch on them quickly today. I'm going to talk about a couple of them. We're going to run up against the time marker here in just a few minutes, which is fine. Then we're going to come back tomorrow and we're going to dive into the rest of them. So the first one, I'll just read through all 6 of them quick. Prioritize well-being, recommit to building relationships, communicate, use all 4 sites. That should make sense to you now after you saw the model. Stay focused on your mission and values, find the path forward. Those are the 6 things. And that's what we're putting out. And the 6 things that we're going to talk about tomorrow, break up into small groups, practice with them. But it's all about how do we move our organizations forward, even in this time of uncertainty. The first thing, prioritize well-being. You've heard me talk about this a little bit already today, but I wanted to come back to it, show you this visual, again, just sort of changing the mental models here a little bit. This is part of a blog series that we actually put together with 3 or 4 other consulting firms. The logos are down in the bottom right of this slide, and you may recognize some of these folks depending on where you are in the country. You may have worked with some of them. And way back, we wrote this initial blog post in April of 2020. And it was true then, and it's true now, that as organizations, and especially as leaders, we need to prioritize well-being. And prioritizing well-being starts with self. Are you okay? Have you taken the mental breaks that you need? Have you checked out when you needed to check out for a day, for a long weekend? I realize some of you say, look, I'm not in a job where I can do that, but I'm just telling you, we have to, right? Michael, I'm thinking back to your comment from a few minutes ago. It might not be that we get back in the office 9 to 5, but have we created boundaries? Have we said, look, I'm not checking email after 6 o'clock. Like, I'm going to eat dinner with my family. I'm going to really take a break. Speaking of family, are they okay? Are you doing everything you can to take care of them? Your team, your clients and partners in the community, the organization as a whole. This is our well-being prioritization, at least it was for us at the time. And we think it holds true still. that we need to prioritize our well-being, even as some numbers in the pandemic are starting to decrease, even as vaccines are becoming available. This idea of well-being and taking care of yourself, your family, and your team really speaks to the definition of being a leader. And leading through uncertainty is first making sure you're okay and then checking on everybody else. The analogy a lot of people use is in the airplane, right? I will tell you, the last time I was on an airplane was March 13th of 2020. Haven't been on one in a while, but I know that still, the next time I get on the airplane, when they're going through the safety instructions, what are they going to tell me about my mask? Those of you that fly on planes, what do they tell you about your mask? If the oxygen mask drops, what are you supposed to do? Kelsey, winner, put your own mask on before helping others, right? Check in on yourself. And again, I just think as managers and leaders, we get so much like nose in the grind here that sometimes we forget to look up and check on ourselves. So I'm repeating myself here to make sure that you all hear me say it's okay to put your own mask on first, because your family, your team, your organization needs for you to be your best self as a leader. So that's number one, prioritize well-being. Number two, recommit to relationships. Recommit to relationships. A couple things that I'll say here, like even though we can't be in the same space, right? Even though we can't be in the same space, you need to figure out as a leader, how do we create the same level of energy and intimacy? We've sort of sprinkled in some ideas of that today. I think also the morning presenter, is it Jonah? Am I getting his name correctly? Am I remember that? I think Jonah did this well. Also, we've sprinkled it in, like, don't be afraid to get people in pairs on Zoom calls. Don't be afraid to use the chat. Don't be afraid to use free tools like menti.com or like Jamboard on Gmail, right? Like Casey and I have been doing a lot of scavenger hunts with people. We've been doing sort of gift card giveaways sometimes, just trying to liven up the energy, right? We need to keep the energy and intimacy. Proximity matters to so much of our work. How do we get close, not just to our employees, but to our partners in the community, right? And in virtual engagement, realize that we're building incrementally. It's difficult to get people onto a 3, 4, 5 hour Zoom call. Trust me. It's one of the reasons we broke this session up, right? Even breaking up 2.5 hours into a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow. This is virtual engagement. We're trying to do things just a little bit at a time. Remembering again, as a leader, balancing this with self-care, that you need to be the most accessible, flexible. Just showing up doesn't mean you're accessible. We got to start meeting people where they are, and also making sure that we're ensuring equitable engagement, right? And again, this is for our staff as much as it's for our partners. But how are we being equitable? Recognizing again that some of our staff are also teachers right now. They're also taking care of their children or their parents. It took me 3 hours the other day on the internet to try to get my parents a vaccine appointment. That's a true story, right? And it's like, I got to create that space somehow. But it's not fair for me to say, well, I own this company, so I can take 3 hours whenever I want. But those of you that work for me, you can't do that, not on the clock, right? Like those aren't equitable arrangements. What are we doing to make sure that people do have access to internet, that do have access to laptops, that do have access to quiet places in their home? These are things I think a lot of us took for granted that not everybody has, right? We were working with an organization not too long ago, and talking about this equitable arrangement, and one of the young staff raised their hand. And again, I know your organizations. I used to be in one. We employ a lot of young staff, especially as frontline direct service providers. And she raised her hand and she said, Forrest, I need to ask you a question that I've never said, like, to my boss or anybody. Like, I live with 4 other roommates, and 2 of them are bartenders. One of them doesn't have a job right now, and they're partying every night, and it's loud, and it's hard for me to get up at 8 in the morning and be on a Zoom call. And then my roommates come stumbling out hungover, and I was like, oh man, like that's a scenario I hadn't thought about, right? That's just one example of hundreds, right? We also have staff who maybe are in areas that don't have good internet access, but the expectation is that everybody's on Zoom all day long. How are we really thinking through these things, recognizing that at the end of the day, it all comes back to relationships? When we were in the office, we'd have staff meetings. We'd pick up the phone and buzz somebody and say, can you come down to my office, right? We'd have impromptu meetings at the water cooler, at the copy machine. How do we recreate those things virtually to make sure that we have recommitted to building relationships, not just for our partners? I want to say that again, because I know in your organizations, you're having these conversations about how do we continue to engage with our partners in the community. Don't forget, as leaders, you also need to be spending an equal amount of time, if not more, asking yourself, how do we create the energy, intimacy, and relationships, and how do we hold them with our staff, with our teams internally? And are we putting as much energy into relationships internal with our teams as we are external with our partners, right? That's number 2. And then number 3, I was just gonna say this, there's a couple images here that we can pop up. You all have these, right? You've seen them. These happen to be Zoom calls with my family. This is like just having fun and waving to people. And I laugh when I think about building relationships. Not that you need to meet my whole family. That's not the point here. But in the top right picture, there are people waving on camera there. I'm in a picture. There's also people from New York, Los Angeles, and Hong Kong in that picture. I've spent more time with my cousins that are scattered across the world in the last 10 months on camera together than we've ever spent, right? And we've really built that energy. This picture down below, that behind that giraffe mask is actually my 80-year-old mom. I'm just talking about getting her a vaccine appointment. She was so sad at the beginning of the pandemic because we were going on these calls and she had an old iPhone, like a 2 maybe or something like that. And she couldn't figure out how to get some of the emojis and different things on her phone. So we had to go back. We had to actually upgrade mom's technology. And then once we did, then for like a month, you couldn't even have a conversation with my mother because all she wanted to do was be a giraffe or a monkey or a panda or something, right? And she was just laughing all the time every time it came up. But it was like we had to do something special to make sure my mom felt bought into the conversation. And you could go one by one through your staff. Like, what am I doing to make sure Edward's bought in, make sure Larry's bought in, make sure Julie's bought in? Like, what am I doing for my staff to make sure they have what they need, right? And I use the example of my mom because in the early days, she just didn't have what she needed. She couldn't see our faces. We were just talking, right? It was all this sort of stuff. And again, I've never seen my mom laugh like she laughs when she puts this dumb giraffe hat on. But think about what those sort of things can do for your staff too. And Katie, I see your comment in the chat. Like, this is using insight to understand what our staff need and then getting them what they need. That's part of being a leader. It's part of building relationships in this moment. And then the last one that I'll highlight today, number 3 on our list of 6, is communicate. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Probably over communicate. My colleague, Casey Banks, who's been kind enough to be running the slides behind the screen for us today, is the communications expert on our team. I make no bones about that. And she's the one that has said to me, if you think you are communicating too much, it probably means you are doing the right amount. Now, you might recognize that comment because I think Casey actually stole that from Dr. Fauci way back when, somewhere in the pandemic, when he said, if you think you're doing too much to protect yourself from COVID-19, you're probably doing the right amount. Casey has taken that and put it into this presentation for you all as leaders about communicating. internally and externally, sharing with your team, your leadership team, your employees, your donors, your grantors, your clients. I'm not sure if Megan Selheim, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but Megan, you put a chat actually in the last presentation, in Jonah's presentation, that we have multiple audiences. We have youth, we have the implementers. You know, then I would also add, you've got staff internally, you've got grantors, you've got clients, you've got all of these folks. We need to be over communicating with all of them. And Trina, I see your comment. Over communicating doesn't necessarily mean making conversations too long. It just means making them more frequent as well, right? Making sure that we're over communicating, saying things over and over. Kara, you talked about in your chat, I love it, weekly 30-team check-ins. Many times it's just connecting with each other. We work with a client in North Carolina, and I don't always name our clients except when I'm saying good things. This is the North Carolina Partnership for Children, and they have 76 affiliate programs that serve all 100 counties in North Carolina. If any of you are in the Carolinas, you may recognize NCPC or the Smart Start Network. But it's 76 different organizations that are all part of the network, the North Carolina Partnership for Children. They decided they were going to get on the phone 2 times a week for an hour, the 76 executive directors from this network. And when I heard them first say that, they're a client of ours, and I was like, no way. No way is everybody going to do that. It's just not possible. Nobody's going to give you that time. This was back in April or May. In February of 2021, that network of 76 people is still meeting twice a week for an hour. And Kara, it's exactly what you said. A lot of it isn't even agenda or formal. It's just catching up, keeping up on what's happening. And Casey also reminds me frequently that this communicate also means we have to say things in different ways, right? Because not everybody communicates the same way. We use different technology platforms. Sometimes it's Zoom. Sometimes we need a good old-fashioned phone call, right? It's whatever it takes to get it done. It's the same reason why those of you that are social media users will post the same picture on Twitter, Facebook, and an Instagram story, right? Because you've got different people who are interacting with you different ways. Think about that analogy when you're thinking about how do we push things out to our staff. Not everybody reads the daily email the same way. Sometimes we need different communication channels. So again, as I said, we were going to sprint through a lot of theory and a lot of stuff today, and we did. As we tee up this conversation for tomorrow, because we started like 10 minutes early, I think I actually finished 7 or 8 minutes early, so we've got a little time for questions. But let me just sort of recap quickly where we came today, and then start thinking of what questions you have, pop them in the chat, and or we can come off mute. So we started with this idea that we've got to be consciously thinking about the challenges of the day. And as managers and leaders, this is all part of the uncertainty that we're dealing with. And part of leading through uncertainty is recognizing that disruption is not a new concept. We did examples from Blockbuster and Kodak, and disruptions come in all different shapes and sizes. And a lot of times we hear from organizations, it's not the big disruption, it's the little one, right? It's, I had a staff person leave, or, you know, we if we're on the East Coast, we had a hurricane, we were shut down for 2 weeks, or our grant budget got cut 20%, or we lost a school partner. We thought we were going to implement in 5 schools, and now we're just in 4, right? Disruptions look all different. And so to manage them, one of the things we have to do as an organization is be more resilient. We talked about organizational resiliency. We looked at the foresight model. We said the most important thing you'll hear me say today is that managing through uncertainty is not about what we do, it's about how we think, right? And so then we started talking about what's the path forward? What's the path forward? And I offered 6 thoughts on the path forward. Number 1, to focus on well-being. Number 2, recommit to relationships. Number 3, over communicate with our staff and team. Now you're saying, Forrest, you said there were 6, that's 3. Exactly, which is why I need to see you tomorrow so that we can jump into number 4, number 5, and number 6 on our list. Jess, I see your comment. Interested to hear more about managing folks' well-being within appropriate work boundaries. I'm going to grab that and we will, I will get to that one tomorrow, I promise. It's a good question. In addition to Jess's comment, managing well-being when there's nothing you can do about it except listen and empathize. Yeah, this is an interesting comment, Isabella, because we do end up in that situation a lot, right? Especially now, and people are hurting. People are hurting for all different kinds of reasons. And I will tell you, I'll tell you a very personal story. We lost a member of the 1,000 Feathers team earlier this year to COVID. January 7th, 2021. And we have a very small team. And so when you lose a member of your team, when this pandemic hits so close to home, we lost a colleague and a good lifelong friend. You know, in the context of this presentation, it was one of the most significant disruptions I've ever experienced as a leader of an organization. And I'm saying that, Isabella, to go exactly to your comment. Sometimes as leaders, we feel helpless, but I will tell you that I will never forget. I will never, ever forget the people the last 2 or 3 weeks that have picked up the phone and called and just said, "Are you doing okay?" Who have sent me a text and just said, "I just want to check in on you," right? Who have said, "I'm here. If you want to talk, I'm happy to listen." Some people I took up on that offer, some people I didn't. I say that to say we do feel helpless as leaders sometimes, but our ability to listen and empathize goes a lot further than we think. And again, sometimes as leaders and managers, we think we need to be in a place where we're fixing something or we're solving something, when right now, sometimes what we really need to do is listen. And that goes for all of these things I was talking about, right? I mean, I have tried to be a good ally, for example, to my Black and brown brothers and sisters. And in a lot of cases, what I can do is listen. And I can say, "I've got your back." And I can say, I'm here with you. And I can say, I can't say, "I understand," but I can say, like, "Man, call me," right? Like, if we need to talk. So I just want to say, like, don't undersell the listen and empathize portion of our management and leadership responsibilities. Occasionally we've got problems and we've got to solve them, but sometimes in this managing through uncertainty, it is about listening and empathizing. And I appreciate your comments in the chat. And I don't share that for any reason other than it seemed like a good example in that moment. And I appreciate it. Just like I've appreciated everybody else, I appreciate your comments. And I'm grabbing some of the other questions that are here. I'm going to trust, Katie, that somebody on your team is capturing the chat, so maybe we can filter back through it. My responsibility for tonight is to look at some of the questions you posed and make sure that we come ready tomorrow to answer them. Like I said, we're gonna get together tomorrow. I want to be careful about what time that is. Somebody that knows more than me should say that in a minute. But we're going to get back together tomorrow. We're going to get into some groups and we're going to get right to work. My hope for tomorrow is that you leave with 2, 3, 4 different tools that you can then turn right around and take back and use with your organization. So today was the theory, the concept, the base behind everything. Tomorrow we practice and we get to work. One of those tools is the organizational survey that you have. I don't want you to forget about that. Take 5, 7, 10 minutes right now or later tonight, complete the survey because you're going to need it tomorrow in your groups. By my clock, it's 3:15 exactly. I'm in Central Time Zone, which means 4:15 on the East Coast. Katie Sulentrop is smiling because she and I have worked together for 100 years and I never finish presentations on time. So Katie, you'll never be able to say never again. Here we are right on time. Thank
Awesome.
you all very much, and I look forward.
Only because
to
we
tomorrow.
started 10 minutes early.
You're exactly right about that, and I took every opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Forrest. I know we're all looking forward to tomorrow. Thank you very much. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
everybody. Have a good night.